beginning, there was a madman. Adolf Hitler's Third Reich ruled the continent of Europe. Powerful, arrogant, murderous. But in the end, it all came crashing down. As the Soviets closed in on the Führer bunker in Berlin, Hitler shot himself. His mistress, Eva Braun, took poison. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels first poisoned his 6 children, then he and his wife poisoned themselves. But what of the others who served Hitler and his murderous regime? Some were brought to trial at Nuremberg and elsewhere. But not all. Many of them just disappeared. As it turns out, it was a disappearance well planned. Argentina, South America. It was a country off the beaten path in the mid-1940s with its own burgeoning Nazi movement. And with a former Army colonel named Juan Perón in charge, a country ready to play a pivotal role in providing a safe haven for the Nazis. How many?
We do not know the size of the problem.
Are we talking hundreds? Are we talking thousands?
I'm afraid that may be in the thousands.
Last December, Argentine Foreign Minister Guido de Tella took a giant step toward exposing the truth when he signed this decree, opening the secret files of government agencies, including the federal police and the foreign ministry. Now, after all these years, the world can finally see what Argentina did.
Visas were handed out just wholesale with no questions asked.
There was a bit of that, yes.
So the government knew that it was giving visas, allowing Nazi war criminals to come to Argentina.
Some people in government certainly did.
These are the archives of Argentine immigration. Everyone who registered into the country is listed here. After the war, when the Nazis began flooding in, some were so bold as to use their own names. Here's an entry from June of 1948. Schroeder, Erich Emil, says he was an engineer. Erich Schroeder was the Gestapo chief of Portugal. Some, of course, didn't use their own names. Here's an entry from July of 1950. Clement Ricardo says he was a technician. That's Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi who supervised the extermination of the Jews. And this one from June of 1949, at the very bottom of the page, here's the name, Gregor Helmut, who says he was a mechanic. Who was this mechanic? Let's see.
Gregor lived in various Buenos Aires suburbs. For a time, he had a jungle hideaway nearby. But as the newly opened federal police records show, he felt safe enough after a few years to re-register under his real name, Jose Mengele, Dr. Joseph Mengele. He was no mechanic. At Auschwitz, they called him the Angel of Death. He helped select those who would live and die. He tortured and murdered children, particularly twins, with his medical experiments. Mengele is believed to have died in 1979 in Brazil. But we now have proof for the first time that the Argentine authorities knew about his activities in their country and protected him.
There you can see his activities here in the country, how he lived with such impunity.
When the archives were opened, Dr. Beatrice Gurevich, research director for Jewish organizations in Buenos Aires, set to work gathering data on Nazi war criminals like Mengele.
This is a document from the federal police.
Those are Mengele's fingerprints?
These are Mengele's fingerprints.
They had him on file?
Yes, of course. And the argument for not extraditing him was that Argentine didn't extradite people for political crimes.
Mengele? Political crimes?
So it is said in the document.
Well, Dr. Mengele was one of the great butchers of all times.
That was the argument. Why are you so astonished about this? This is absence of moral responsibility.
But this absence of moral responsibility was not Argentina's alone. Nazi war criminals needed help to escape Europe. They got it here in Rome, beginning with two highly unlikely sources, the intelligence services of Britain and the United States.
They saved tens of thousands of Nazis in order to use them against the Soviets.
Peter Tompkins should know. He was a wartime spy working undercover in Rome for the American OSS, predecessor of the CIA.
Are you telling me that the OSS helped Nazis escape justice at the end of the war?
Oh, absolutely. They created a clandestine army of ex-Nazis, using people like Klaus Barbie, for instance, who said, oh, that's a good Nazi, that's a good Nazi, I know him, I know him, I know him.
But if it sounds incredible that the U.S. would use Klaus Barbie, later convicted in France as the Butcher of Lyon, because he and his fellow Nazis were thought to possess experience that could help against the Soviets, consider who else played a major role in the Nazis' escape route. None other than the Vatican.
The Vatican then had an entire system of monasteries and convents. We called it the Ratline. That was the American code word for the operation.
The Ratline.
The Ratline.
John Loftus is a former Nazi hunter for the U.S. Justice Department, who spent years investigating this elaborate escape route known as the Ratline. He says Pope Pius XII was pro-German because he saw the Nazis as a bulwark against the communists, whose ideology the Pope viewed as a mortal threat to the Church. So beginning in 1945, the Pope allowed one of his bishops to produce phony ID for fugitive Nazis. Bishop Alois Hudal, with the blessing of some British and U.S. government officials, set up shop in this nondescript rectory just outside the Vatican.
My estimate is that we sent some 60,000 fugitive Nazi war criminals to Argentina after World War II, during a 5-year period.
But from his vantage point overlooking St. Peter's Basilica, the historian who studied that period for the Vatican, Father Robert Graham, says it was simple refugees being helped, not Nazis. Though
One or two may have slipped through. Of course,
One or two?
yes. There was no.
Father, there were thousands.
Oh, please. No, don't kid me. Don't be ridiculous. Thousands. That's absurd.
to the extent that Bishop Hudal was helping fugitive Nazis, Father Graham insists the bishop was operating totally on his own.
He didn't speak for the Vatican.
He was a counselor in the Holy Office.
Oh, please. That doesn't mean anything from the point of what we're talking about here.
He was a friend of the Pope's.
Please. Are you all so simple and unsophisticated as to believe that stuff? Please, be more intelligent than that. Give the Pope some credit.
Did Pope Pius know what was going on?
Oh, of course. But Pius, you must remember, Pius XII was scared to death of communists.
Whatever Pius's role, it is, however, indisputable that the fugitive Nazi hordes came down these narrow streets looking for Bishop Hudal and his assistant, a mysterious former Nazi army lieutenant named Reinhard Kops.
Reinhard Kopp's job was to come up with identity documents. He needed 3 pieces of paper to get a Nazi war criminal smuggled out of Italy. One was a Red Cross passport, and the Vatican took care of that. The second was the Argentine visa, and Perón took care of that. And the third was an identity paper. Cops handed those out to the fugitive Nazis, so if they were arrested in Rome, they could say, well, I'm living at this monastery.
I had no question in my mind that he had participated in the Ratline, getting other Nazis out of Europe.
Rick Eaton of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which works hard to hunt down Nazi war criminals, had a tip that Kops went down the Ratline himself to Argentina. Posing as a neo-Nazi, Eaton found a man who called himself Juan Mahler, a writer of pro-Nazi books, with a story that sounded like Kops.
He said he had an office in the Vatican, and it was his job to get people papers.
Could Juan Mahler be Reinhard Kops in hiding? We went to the Argentine Andes, to a town named Bariloche, where we found the man who helped run the Ratline, a 79-year-old ex-Nazi named, well, named what?
Senor Mahler. I'm Sam Donaldson of American Television, ABC News.
Yes, but what do you know? What do you want?
Well, is your name Reinhard Kops?
Excuse me, but I have no time for such silly...
Well, did you help people escape here to Argentina from Rome?
No, on the contrary.
So your name is not Reinhard Kops?
No.
This is not a photostat of your membership in the Nazi Party?
No, never. I've been a member of... on the contrary, I tell you, if they wanted to kill me, I had to flee the Nazis, because I saved 25 Jews from going to Auschwitz.
But thanks to Rick Eaton's undercover work, we had a snapshot of a picture hanging in Juan Mahler's living room of a young officer being sworn into the German army that looked very much like a young Reinhard Kopp's. And we had a copy of Kopp's Nazi Party card and showed it to him. Confronted with this, the cover story cracked.
You are Reinhard Kopp's?
No.
No?
I was in when was it? 52. The German embassy here gave me the name.
The name of
Mahler.
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 And what was your name before Mahler?
Kops.
Kops. Your name was Kops.
Yeah. No, it's not. He was. That's a great difference.
Oh, it was Kops.
Yes.
Having admitted who he was, would he now admit what he had done?
Have you ever heard of the Ratline? Something called the Ratline?
No.
But when we played Kops a tape Rick Eaton had made of a conversation between the two of them, in which Kops admitted that he had in fact helped Bishop Udall run the Ratline,
You worked for the Vatican?
For the Vatican, yes.
he remembered that also.
I had to tell him this man had been that. And this man is not here because he killed people upside down.
But the bishop was the one who helped organize this system whereby Nazi war criminals came to Argentina.
Yes,
And you
I
helped
know.
him.
I know now that it was something like that. But in those times, I did not know.
But why would Kops himself need to disappear to Argentina under a false name? There is some evidence that by the end of the war, he was commander of an intelligence unit in Yugoslavia which had the job of eliminating anti-Nazi partisans.
I was not in Yugoslavia, Albania, in the SS.
Clearly, Kops gives up his secrets only grudgingly. But watch how he treats others' secrets.
There's a lot of people here still Nazi. A lot, I tell you.
Who are they?
Kops pulled us a few feet up the sidewalk and turned his back on the cameras and told us what we wanted to know.
His name is Pripke, P-R-I-Pripke, Erich Pripke.
Actually, we already knew about Pripke. We had him under surveillance. He's the man in the restaurant wearing the yellow sweater. We knew he was part of a shocking story. But would he admit to it?
Senor Pripke? Sam Donaldson of American television.
Yes.
Senor Pripke?
Yes.
Can we talk to you for just a moment?
Yes.
1,000 miles south of Buenos Aires, in the shadow of the Andes Mountains, lies a little piece of Germany. Bariloche, Argentina feels like it belongs in Bavaria. And that's no accident, because many Germans moved here after World War II. One of them was Erich Pripke, once a captain in the dreaded Nazi SS, now an 80-year-old grandfather.
You were in the Gestapo in 1944, were you not? In Rome?
Yes, in Rome, yes.
How do you feel about the Nazi Party now?
No, I'm glad that it's over. I finished the Nazis at 45, you see.
Today, Erich Pripke lives quietly. He is prominent in the German community in Bariloche, chairman of the Cultural Association. He is soft-spoken and kindly-looking. But what was he like back then?
What kind of a man was Pripke? Well, to get a little more insight on that, all you have to do is visit the Museum for the Liberation of Rome here on the Via Tasso. You see, this building used to be the Gestapo Interrogation Center, and it was here that Erich Pripke did some of his cruelest work.
Elvira Sabatini is the curator of this museum. In 1944, her husband was picked up and locked in this tiny cell for a month. He thought he was going to die and scratched his will on the plaster wall. He almost did die.
Your husband was tortured here?
Yes, many times. By Kappler and by Pripke.
Pripke?
Pripke too, yes. He hit him often with brass knuckles. He was very controlled, very cold.
Peter Tompkins, the American spy posing as an Italian, actually met Pripke at a party.
He was charming, cold, personable, good-looking, impeccably uniformed.
Capable of murder?
He's involved in the massacre. 3 days later, he was in the Ardeatine caves butchering 335 people.
These are the Ardeatine Caves of Rome, today a memorial, complete with rows and rows of coffins. On March 24th, 1944, a place of mass murder. Fiera and Vera Simoni, sisters now in their 70s, come here often to remember what happened here to their father.
And then over here, the bodies were stacked?
All this, yes.
Did you find your father here?
Yes. The workmen found.
And had been shot?
And that has been shot.
This was what it looked like when the Allies, who had pushed the Germans out of Rome, found the bodies 3 months later. How many bodies? 335. All civilians.
The prisoners were brought there in trucks with their hands tied behind their backs.
Peter Tompkins also has a reason to visit the caves. Back in 1944, he was a U.S. spy working undercover in Rome. Among the victims of the massacre were 22 of his Italian agents. He attended their autopsies.
And then they were taken in 5 at a time, where couplers, NCOs, and officers shot each one in the back of the neck with one shot, and made them kneel, made the next successive 5 kneel on top of the others, so the corpses accumulated, which is, it's a scene so horrifying, it's hard to believe.
Herbert Kappler, a lieutenant colonel, was the Gestapo chief in Rome, assigned to carry out the massacre. Erich Pribke, a captain, was Kappler's second in command, according to this U.S. intelligence report obtained by Primetime. After the war, Kappler was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Pribke escaped from a prisoner of war camp in 1946 and disappeared, until we found him in Argentina just a month ago. Surprisingly, perhaps, he told us at least part of the story of the massacre of Rome.
You know, the communists blow up a group of our German soldiers.
Yes.
For every German soldier, 10 Italians had to die.
Civilians?
Well, civilians, they have been morally terrorists.
But children were killed?
No, not at all.
14-year-old boys were killed?
In fact, a 14-year-old and 2 15-year-olds were shot that day. Men in their 70s shot that day. A priest shot that day. And of the 335 victims, 70 were Jewish.
All the family of my mother.
All the families?
Oh, yes. 7 persons of the same family, 3 generations in the same day.
Julius Pizzuccino's family was Jewish. Her grandfather and 26 members of his family were killed by the Nazis. 18 women and children were loaded aboard trains and sent to Auschwitz.
And when they arrived, immediately after 9 days, they went to the gas chambers. Not one of them returned.
And the men?
The 7 men were killed to the cave Ardeatine.
Who is Erich Pribke? Well, for half a century, he was just the owner of a delicatessen in a small town in Argentina. Then, one day, a team from ABC News arrived in town and reminded the world of an awful crime that was committed in Rome on 2 days in March 1944.
Senor Pribke, Sam Donaldson of American television.
Yes.
Senor Pribke?
Yes.
It was spring 1993. Sam Donaldson and a crew from Primetime Live arrived in the picturesque town of San Carlos de Bariloche in Argentina. They were reporting a story on Nazis who had escaped after the war. In Bariloche, they found Erich Pribke.
You were in the Gestapo in 1944, were you not? In Rome?
Yes, in Rome, yes.
And nowhere did that story make bigger news than in Rome, where a tomb on the edge of the city holds the remains of 335 people slaughtered by the Nazis. Here, they remember this Erich Pribke, a 31-year-old Nazi intelligence officer, a member of Hitler's SS, a man deeply involved in mass murder.
You were there when they were shot, the civilians.
Yes, the first ones, yes, I saw them, yes.
But why did you shoot them? They had not done anything.
Yes. You know, that was our order. You know, in the war, you know, that kind of things happened, you know.
You were just following orders?
Yes, of course, yes. But I didn't shoot anybody.
Didn't shoot anybody? That's not what he said when he gave this statement while being held in a POW camp in 1946. Then Pripka admitted shooting 2 people. I went in with the second or third party and killed a man with an Italian machine pistol. Towards the end, I killed another man with the same machine pistol.
How do you feel inside about what you
I
did?
feel very bad. Nobody from us wanted to do that, you know.
But you killed civilians in the cave.
No.
You
That
told
was
me you were
assassin.
there.
Yes, I was there, but that was an assassin that was ordered by our command.
But orders are not an excuse.
Oh, well, at that time, order was an order, you see.
And you carried it out.
Yeah, I had to carry it out, yes.
And civilians died.
Civilians died, yes. Many civilians died. On all parts in the world, still they are dying.
And now you tell me you feel sorry for it.
Very sorry, very sorry, very sorry.
He is a liar. We think he represents today all the bad that was there. It was a cruelty.
He says he's sorry.
Sorry.
It's not enough.
You say you feel very bad about what happened.
Yes, very bad, really very bad.
Why didn't you stand up then and say, I will not do it. I will not shoot these civilians.
You live in this time, but we that live in 1933. You understand that? Whole Germany wasn't it. Nobody won't speak about it now. But the most part of Germany was Nazi.
You were a Nazi.
I was a young man. I was a Nazi, young man, when I was a young man.
Do you think because you were a young man you should be excused for what you did?
No. Many young men do things when they are old men like me now, they're very sorry about it.
But should old men not pay for the crimes they committed?
Well, we didn't commit a crime. We did what we ordered us, you know. That was not a crime. That was a
Shooting
rebellion.
civilians in time of war is against all international
Yes,
conventions.
today, but not in this time.
So, Pripka participated in a massacre and in torture of civilians. But there's even more.
Did you deport Jews to concentration camps?
You? No, nobody, no.
Never?
No, never.
You never worked with Eichmann?
No, I was to the end in Rome.
Do you consider yourself a war criminal?
No. I never killed a man because he was a Jew, you see.
Well, what does the record say about that? In London, at the Public Records Office, we found files which show that after his escape in 1946, the British, French, Italian, and American governments were all looking for Pripka as a suspected war criminal. In Berlin, the West Germans had allegations that he was involved in the deportation of some 6,000 to 7,000 Jews from Italy to the death camps. And just 2 days ago in Jerusalem, Israeli Holocaust researchers uncovered Gestapo documents from Pripka's office authorizing arrests for Judenaktion, the deportation of Jews under the authority of SS Department 4B, the department headed by Adolf Eichmann, who was eventually kidnapped from Argentina by the Israelis, tried and executed for his crimes.
How do you feel about the fact that 6 million Jews were executed, killed?
Yeah, no, I feel very sorry about it. Very, very sorry, because it's terrible to kill men, women, and children.
But you did it.
No, I didn't. No, I never was against Jews. I'm from Berlin. We lived together in Berlin with many Jews.
Pripke was a captain in the SS. He volunteered for that. He liked Hitler's policy.
Rabbi Marvin Heyer is dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Nazi Hunting Center.
He thought there was something good about the idea that the Jews are the Untermenschen. So it's preposterous for him to look into the camera and say now, oh, no, he likes Jews. He has nothing against Jews. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So why was Erich Pripka not tried on the allegations he had sent Jews to their death? Remember, he escaped. And until we found him, the authorities didn't know where he was. However, now in Berlin, the Pripka file can still be reopened. Ursula Solf is the deputy prosecutor there for the investigation of Nazi crimes.
The fact that he was accused in the past of being responsible for deportations indicates he could eventually be convicted here in Germany.
Now the man has been found. Now the onus is on Germany to say, we're opening the case, we want him extradited, and now's the time for Argentina to say, we're putting him on a plane.
And if Germany should say it wants to try him now, Argentine Foreign Minister Guido de Tella says he's ready.
Well, if someone comes forward and demonstrates that you are harboring someone who is a Nazi war criminal, what action would you take?
We would extradite him.
You would extradite the individual?
Yes, to be judged in whichever country he comes from.
When we talked to Erich Pribka, he did not seem worried. He lives under his own name. He spoke to us freely. But by the end of the interview, he sounded unhappy.
You came over me like that. Not a nice manner you did it. You are not a gentleman.
I'm not a gentleman.
So why not leave Erich Pribka alone to live out his long life unmolested by prosecutors and juries?
Well, first of all, for the future, so that would-be murderers who are born tomorrow won't get the idea that if you're clever enough to hide out, crimes against humanity can be rewarded by society.
But also, Rabbi Heyer adds, for the past. Remember the faces of the doomed victims, and then ask the question, why should the world care? 50 years after a madman and his henchmen inflicted unspeakable horrors on humanity, there is new shame among those who sheltered the criminals.
The phenomenon did exist, was significant. There was connivance, and we're ashamed.
Old anger in those who will never forget.
They have not faced the bar of justice, and time cannot be their refuge.
And unrelenting pain over loved ones lost.
Listen, I don't want revenge, but I want justice. And I will never forgive them. Never.
There is no certainty, of course, that Germany will ask for Erich Pribka's extradition. But at least with Argentina now cooperating, he and thousands of other Nazis who may still be living there must rest less easily. And perhaps for some, there will come a day of reckoning after all. For our part, we'll stay on the case. Did Pope Pius know what was going on?
Oh, of course. But Pius, you must remember, Pius XII was scared to death of communists.
In his steadfast opposition to communism, the Pope welcomed the rise of right-wing regimes all over Europe.
You know, that was our order. You know, in the war, you know that kind of things happened, you know.
You were just following orders?
Yes, of course, yes. Oh, well, at that time, order was an order, you see.
And you carried it out?
Yeah, I had to carry it out, yes.